What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Grinderslive here at Rotogrinders. I'm Turd Ferguson. I'm joined here by Will, and we've got a full day of basketball. Where I'm at, it's way too early in the morning. I am just pounding coffee as we speak here. But this is going to be an interesting day. We got, 6 games here on the slate. I'm joined by Chief Justice Will Priester. How you doing over there, buddy?
I'm good, man. Definitely ready to get this slate kicked off. It's an exciting one. Let's just not take people behind the curtain on what I'm doing today. It probably will come up. Just let's not give it to them early. I don't think anybody's going to agree, but I don't care.
I mean, I like what you're doing. We talked a little bit about it pre-show, and I like what you're doing. It's an interesting slate. I don't know what's going to go on the first game. Like the Brooklyn-Milwaukee game, you could be screwed if you fade guys, or you could be entirely fine if you just take the entire first game off the slate here and don't even bother with it. But we'll get that to you soon. Just quick overview of the slate. What are your initial thoughts here? What are you thinking about a little bit? Any sports betting stuff you got going on? Is it legal over in Charlotte? You're over in Charlotte, right? North Carolina?
Yeah. That would be a negative.
Oh, that's too bad. It's legal where I'm at, and I've already been placing bets all morning. Ooh, it's a fun time. Gosh, I love that it's legal here. I have just every single morning, wake up, brew a cup of coffee, and look through 5 different sports betting sites for the best lines. It's a great way to start the day for a nice little degenerate like me. But what are your initial thoughts on the slate?
Well, this first game is a mess. That's my initial thoughts. But ironically, on FanDuel, there are just too many good value options because they're all pretty much under 4K. 4K and under for these Brooklyn guys on FanDuel. Are they bad chalk? Are they good chalk? I think at least half of this team is good chalk, and I think the other half is bad chalk. In terms of Milwaukee, I don't really feel good about playing anyone outside of the cheaper guys, maybe DiVincenzo or Sterling Brown or something like that. Just DJ Wilson, maybe the backups. I don't feel comfortable playing any starters in that game, and I know we're going to get to a little bit more analysis on it, but overall, man, I just think this is probably the most weird slate we've had out of the past 3 or 4 days, and I think taking some stands is going to be how you're going to win some GPPs in this one.
I mean, this is the weirdest NBA slate we've had for at least 4.5 months, right?
Yeah,
I think that's
for
how
sure.
it works. Yeah, well, let's get this started, and I mean, we can mostly talk the overview and not really focus on sites too much in the later games. But I feel like this first one, we definitely need to talk about FanDuel and then talk about DK. Over on DK, we look at projected ownership right now, and people aren't using a lot of these super cheap guys in the Brooklyn game nearly as much. Where we look over on FanDuel, like Crooks is 30% owned. I can't even remember. I didn't look up how to say most of the guys' names on the Brooklyn Nets. But we got multiple guys here, 4K and under, that are going to be 20% owned. So let's start off with Brooklyn here. Like, are you eating some of this chalk?
I think so. I like the fact that on FanDuel, because I think this is actually just more of a FanDuel discussion. I don't even think we really talk about too many guys on DK for this team because, you got Tyler Johnson at 66 and, a couple other guys that are really priced up. Same thing for the other guy, the little guy, Garrett Temple. Same thing for Garrett Temple. So I don't think we're going to touch them as much on DK, but on FanDuel, you got Chioza at 4K, Tyler Johnson at 4K. I think one of those guys is going to get there. I like Tyler Johnson a lot today, just because we've seen what he can do when basically he's one of the primary options. I mean, he could easily get 30 fantasy points in this spot. So I really like him a lot. Garrett Temple, look, I'm just being honest. I'm multi-entering today. So I'm going to get exposure to all of these cheap Brooklyn guys outside of the guys that, I just don't think are going to get there. I actually think I like Timothy Lawawa-Cabarro. I think I like him a lot more than Garrett Temple in this spot. And I know Garrett Temple he's a pro's pro. He's going to go out and do his job. But I just think Timothy gets that garbage run and is able to put up a massive score on the backside of that particular game. Same thing for Karooks. I think Karooks gets the minutes. I think he's involved just enough to get, that 25 to 30 fantasy points. And I think that may be able to carry us home on this slate because, we're kind of log jammed at shooting guard anyway on FanDuel with you kind of have to choose Harden or Luka. I don't think you can play both. So I really like these cheap nets to really give us some value to pay up for some of these studs we may want or not pay up for the studs.
Yeah. No, I'm over on FanDuel. I'm right there with you. Like Chioza, Johnson, Crooks, all way too cheap. Even Gary Temple, all of them are way too cheap. Like this is still a game where people have to be on the floor. It's that simple. Like Brooklyn does not have many guys. They are going to they still have a 106 implied team total. Like 106 points should be scored plus or minus a few. And there's enough guys that have to be in the game with their price tags. People are going to hit value. It reminds me of multiple years ago. Sorry, we just got Dante Hall will come up. Yeah. All right. Yeah, just that Crooks will start. I figured that much already. But go ahead and rank these. And for me, it's Tyler Johnson, it's Crooks, it's Chioza, and then it's probably Temple, and then TLC. But honestly, if TLC's ownership is going to be what we have it listed at, then I think that he might be a better play than Temple by a decent margin because he's only $100 more expensive, and he's going to be way, way less owned. But go ahead and rank your Brooklyn players, and then tell me if you want to play anyone from Brooklyn over on DK.
I think that's where it's at. For me, almost the same. I think I've got TLC probably ranked a bit higher. Same thing for Justin Anderson. Justin Anderson is probably my number one play for Brooklyn on DK at 3K. I just think, this guy, I think he can get you 25 fantasy points in this spot. I definitely think he should get the minutes today. Same way I feel about Timothy. I think these guys are gonna go out and play a little bit in garbage time with a lot less defense. And so I'm really invested in those two guys particularly.
Yeah. Any thoughts on Jamal Crawford? We have a few questions in the comment section here. I mean, he's going to play today. How much we don't really know, but he's sitting there at 3.8K over on FanDuel. He's sitting there over at 4.7 over on DK. Like, he may only get 15 minutes. Who knows how conditioned he is? Like, are you using him at all, or are you just full on fading just because he's probably not going to play it enough?
Well, I think in this particular scenario, if you're multi-entering on FanDuel, maybe you get 5-10%, maybe. On DK, I'm just really not interested in playing anyone outside of maybe Justin Anderson, and I'm not even playing TLC on DK. I mean, that's just too expensive. So probably mainly just Justin Anderson and maybe Karooks on DK. I will say Chris Chioza is just cheap enough that maybe you get a little bit of exposure, but I don't think you have to.
Yeah, what about any of the big guys? Like, obviously Milwaukee has some size. Brooklyn is still going to get destroyed, so it doesn't really matter who's guarding who. But Dante Hall, Lance Thomas, like, both of them are cheap. Both of them are cheap over on DK. Minutes are going to have to be played by someone because even if Milwaukee blows them out, they're still probably going to have to throw some big guy in there towards the end because Milwaukee has a little bit of depth. Any interest in either of the big guys on this slate?
No, and this was a tough call for me because originally when I started out the day, I had planned to invest in Giannis, and that was going to be my approach. But as I started going through the build and started looking at ownership projections, started looking at a little bit more of the salaries and just kind of digging into lineup construction as a whole, I just don't think it's going to be profitable for me to play Giannis today. So I'm hitting the X button on pretty much all of the Milwaukee Bucks outside of the bench players. Like, I don't mind, and now that I know that Connaughton isn't going to play a whole lot of minutes, I love guys like a guy like Dante DiVincenzo, a guy like Sterling Brown. Like, those are the Milwaukee Bucks that I want to invest in. I don't want to invest in the top part of this lineup. So like a DJ Wilson is a guy that I'm probably going to invest in today. Just, a very small percentage, but enough to where if this game is blown out at like 8 minutes left in the third quarter and Brooklyn's down 30, you got to think the bench is going to get run. and they're just going to let these guys roam free in what is essentially going to be a YMCA pickup game. So I'm really interested in these other guys from Milwaukee because I don't like to predict blowouts, but this is certainly going to be a blowout.
I mean, if you had to pick one blowout over the last 15 years, this is probably the top spot here.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
What do you think about Robin Lopez? I mean, yeah, he's 3.2K. Like we've seen him before in the past, get some run and yeah.
I don't hate it. I just think they played DJ Wilson before they rolled out old man Robin Lopez and Ersan Ilyasova today. Hey, garbage time. That's just the way I think they would do it.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's fair. All right. Anything else about this game? Like it's pretty easy. Like just mix and match your ownership over on Brooklyn. There's 5 or 6 guys to pick from, but if you're mass multi-entering, it's going to be an interesting little day for you. Let's move on to the next game here. We got Dallas going up against Sacramento. It is a 137 total, I believe, right now. A lot of high totals today. A lot of high totals every day in the bubble. Who are you looking at on FanDuel and DK over on this? I mean, we got Fox up here at the top. We got Luka up here at the top, and we got Porzingis up here at the top in terms of how many points will likely get scored. We talked about Porzingis a little bit and Luka a little bit before the show. You wanna tell people what you're doing, or just keep that to yourself?
Oh, listen, I don't mind telling people what I'm doing. They know I like to keep it real. I'm all in on Porzingis today. Lock button, 100% every lineup. If it burns me, it burns me. But I am going all in. He's a guy I really like. I think DeLon Wright is really good value on FanDuel and DK, even at 4,100. I think this is a really good spot for him. Tim Hardaway Jr. is another one that's really good on FanDuel. FanDuel just has some guys that I feel like are really mispriced today. On DK, he's 6,100, so I'm not as interested. But I think the big news of the day is, Kristaps Porzingis. I'm hitting the lock button, 100%, and I think he's going to dominate this team. We've seen, Rashawn Holmes get in some foul trouble early, dealing with primetime, big man, and I think Kristaps is a primetime big man in this league. I think, people kind of forgot how good he was because of the injury. And I think this 4 months off, if you look at his production, it's essentially gave him a whole nother offseason to come back and be a stud again. And I think it's showing in his recent play. And at 9K on Draftkings with the guy that's been putting up, 60-plus fantasy points. And I think he could be on his way to 60-plus again as long as this game isn't a blowout. That's just – I think it's a lock button. Him and Luka have pretty much been on an even playing field since this break. Prior to the break, Luka was scoring 60, and Porzingis, you get 30, you get 40. I know it's only a couple of games, but he looks really good. And I think a lot has to do with the layoff and him getting more healthy. So Porzingis is the lock button. And I think that the other news that you want me to share, and I'm going to share it, I am not playing Luka Doncic today on FanDuel. I'm giving him the X button. I had to take some stands. So he's getting the X today. I'm not telling you to do that as a listener. Obviously, Luka's a great play, but just for how I'm approaching my build today, I am hitting the X button on Luka Doncic.
Yeah, no, I don't mind that strategy. And I'm right there with you on Porzingis. Like, he has been on a tear, or he was on a tear before the break started. Like, he had 2 rough games against San Antonio and against Indy. He just shot terrible. So he stopped shooting. He went 4 for 15, 3 for 17. But outside of that, we look at what he's done. 52 points last game versus Phoenix, 70 versus Houston, even though that game went to OT, if I remember correctly, 62 versus Memphis, 66 versus the Pelicans, 75 versus Minnesota. Over his last 7 games, he's had 4 of them over 60, 2 of them over 70, and all but 2 of them over 50. Like, he's been on an absolute tear. He's taking 20-plus shot attempts per game. There's a good matchup going up against Sacramento. He should absolutely smash here. He's way, way too underpriced in comparison to Luka, considering they're basically doing the same amount. This is a two-headed monster. Both of them just chuck the ball all game long. They're doing it all over the place. I love Kristaps in this matchup. He's my favorite play on the board. And currently we have him pegged at 1% ownership on DK, which –
no way.
Based off of you. Yeah, that can't be possible.
That can't be right. I don't think that's right. But let me say, I don't think that's right.
You alone will cause 1% ownership on DK.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm all over. What about over on the Sacramento side here? I mean, you already said you like Tim Hardaway Jr. a little bit over on FanDuel for Dallas, but what about Sacramento here? We've got De'Aaron Fox, probably going to draw a lot of ownership. We've seen what he did right when he got back into the bubble, put 33 shot attempts. Next game, Orlando, a little bit of a rough outing, only put up 10 shot attempts. This is a game that may or may not be close, and if it is close, it's probably going to be Fox to keep it fairly close here. Are you bringing it back with Fox? Are you bringing it back with Holmes? Are you bringing it back with anyone over on the other side with knowing that you're locking in Porzingis?
Yeah, I'm going to have some Holmes. I'm going to have some Nemanja Bjelica. And I'm actually fading Fox as well. But those are the two guys that I'm going to have some exposure to. I thought about playing Buddy Hield today. I mean, I really considered playing Buddy Hield. I just don't like what's going on with his minutes. I really – this is very disappointing with him playing 20 minutes a game right now. This is terrible. This is terrible. So I can't.
What are your thoughts on it? Is it terrible?
Yeah. I mean, listen, Buddy Hield can come on to Charlotte right now. We'll create some room for him, and he can play 30 minutes. And I'm not saying he's the best player in the world, but I definitely think he should be getting more than 20 minutes on this particular team. So once again, this is just terrible.
Yeah, I don't understand why they're doing it. They're still in the playoff hunt. Like, playoff hunt is wide open in the West for the 8th and 9th spot because they have that playing game. Yeah, so I don't understand either, but I don't mind that. Maybe one day he'll get some minutes, but I'm right there with you on everything else. I probably like Fox a bit more than you do. Like, I'm probably going to be bringing back Fox in most of my lineups. I might, like, site dependent, I might lock button Porzingis today, right there with you. So, yeah, it'll either go really good for me or really bad, but I don't really see a way that he fails. Like, obviously, he can shoot bad. Anything can happen. Kristaps is taking stuff off, but like, he's probably going to put up 20 shot attempts in this game. He's going to get it done in other areas, and this is a decent matchup. Plus, the ownership difference between him and Luka and the price savings, it's just fantastic here. But anything else about this game, or are you ready to move on to Phoenix versus the Clippers?
Nah, we can move on, man. Ready to go.
All right, just motor it on through. We got Phoenix versus the Clippers. The Clippers are a 9-point favorite, I believe, or 8.5. Decent total here, 229. One of the best plays on the slate I seem to be gathering from a lot of people is Paul George. 8.1K, a little bit underpriced there. A lot of guys up at the top are going to draw way more ownership with Harden and Luka. Like, are you looking at any of these Clippers players? This might be a blowout. It might not. But a little bit underpriced here for George and probably a little bit underpriced here for Kawhi. Then over on the other side, we got Ayton that's way underpriced here at 7.5K. He's been absolutely crushing, and I think he's going to continue to do that. We got Rubio in a decent matchup. Beverly's not playing a ton of minutes here, so we have to worry about his defense a little bit less. Like, who are you targeting in this game right now on both DK and FanDuel?
Man, listen, we've hit my second lock button of the day. Kawhi Leonard is a lock button at 9,100 on DK. And listen, you come over to FanDuel, it's even worse. He's like 8,500 or 86. I can't remember exactly, but either way, matter of fact, let's get the 8,600 lock button on both sides. No way I don't hit the lock button. This guy's got 60-point upside on any given slate. Terribly underpriced, and I think maybe they're thinking that the algorithm maybe projects that this is going to be a blowout. I'm not so certain that this is going to be a blowout. Phoenix has been playing really competitive basketball in the bubble, so I'm not writing them off at all. So Kawhi's a lot, but obviously I'm going to have plenty of exposure to Paul George, and I'm thinking about whether or not I get some exposure to God, I gotta get back. I gotta start remembering these names. Sorry, guys. To Ivica Zubac, I'm considering it at 4.5K. Just as kind of another cheap guy, especially when a lot of guys are going to be on Karuk's. I think Zubac's not going to play nearly as many minutes as Karuk's. Okay, so in terms of minute equity, they're not the same. But in a matchup here where Zubac may have to play 3 or 4 extra minutes to combat with DeAndre Ayton, I don't hate it at all.
Yeah, no, I don't mind that call at all. He should be in for a decent amount of minutes with Harrell still out. So they're going to need him, although he could get into foul trouble. Still don't mind that play there. The price tag's right. And the ownership, I don't think is going to be terribly high because people just generally don't like playing him regardless. What about over on the Phoenix side? Like, we look at the ownership here. Ayton's going to draw all of it. Like Booker coming in at 6%, Rubio coming in at 1.18%, which seems way too low over on DK in my opinion. He's been playing decent in the bubble, 41 points in one game, 34 points in the other game. Like this is a decent matchup here. He's going to probably play 30 some odd minutes. He's going to shoot. He's going to get it done in other areas here. I really like Rubio in this spot here, considering his price tag and considering his probably ownership.
Yeah, for sure. I think Rubio is a great play on both sites. And today you're really going to kind of hear me differentiate my approach between the sites because, Rubio's 6,700 on DK. He's, him and Ayton, I think, are extremely playable on both sites. At 8,400 for Devin Booker on DK, I don't think he's necessary. On FanDuel, where he's under 8K at about 7,600, much better pricing. I think you get your exposure over there if that's what you're considering. Cam Johnson, 5,100 on DK. I think he's 4,100 on FanDuel. But, mainly I want exposure to Rubio, Booker, and Ayton. Those are going to be my main guys. No secret there. And I think FanDuel is where you get most of your exposure to Booker, Rubio and Ayton on both sides. Not really interested in the secondary pieces like, Kaminsky. I know Cameron Payne's kind of been playing some minutes, but even though he's 3,200, I'm not playing Cameron Payne. I'm just not really going to touch the secondary guys. Rubio, Booker, Ayton, that's where you want to stake your flag.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of right there with you. Like I'm not really a big Booker fan. Like I generally don't play him unless the spot's right, and he always just destroys me. But yeah, like Ayton, just if you're not including ownership, it stands out as an absolutely fantastic play. I mean, let's look at his game log here real quick, guys. If you haven't already bought Rotogrinders Premium, you should probably do that. Lots of things. Lineup HQ has pretty much everything there. So guys, get signed up. But like against Washington, he had 50 points. But look at what he was doing before the break, and you have a 7.5K guy in a matchup that's not that bad for him. And he can go off a 65-70. Like, what are the odds that Ayton outscores Harden in this matchup? Probably 15%. That's more than what I'm willing to go with. FYI, I think you're muted still.
Yeah, no. I'm good. I'm good. I definitely say 15%. Maybe even, let's go with 15. Because, I almost want to push it to 20. Because Ayton does have 60-point upside. And Harden could easily go out and put up 50 today, and Ayton could put up 60, and that's the difference between, your mid-range build and your stars and scrubs build.
Yeah, no, I'm really liking the mid-range build just because of Ayton and Porzingis. Obviously, a little bit different from site to site, but you're really selling me more on this whole fade the studs today on the slate.
Oh, so, you're giving my strategy away.
I mean,
I don't mind, guys. Hey, listen, the listeners know I'll give it out. I don't mind telling them what I'm thinking. I'm always going to give them exactly my approach, and that doesn't mean it's going to work every day, but it's just the way I see it.
I mean, it's always good to know that if they lost money because of you, that means you probably lost more money.
Exactly.
Let's move on to the next game here. We got Orlando going up against Indiana. So one guy that we absolutely have to talk just keeps getting a price raise, and it's still not enough. Over on FanDuel, he's got to be the chalkiest guy on the slate, in my opinion. Warren went up for last two games in the bubble, 67 fantasy points, 74 fantasy points. He's getting all the usage in the world. He's doing everything. He's getting all the minutes. A little bit tougher matchup going against Orlando, although they're not quite as great defensively as they have in the past, and they haven't really been playing that great of defense in the bubble. But, Warren at 6,400 FanDuel, are you full on locking him in?
No. He's not my lock button today. I can't do it. I don't think today is the day for me to lock in TJ Warren. But I will have some exposure. Obviously, I've already told you I'm locking in Kawhi Leonard, so that takes up one of my small forward spots anyway. But, I can't play TJ Warren today in terms of a lock button. I will have exposure. I think he's a fine play. I do think Oladipo plays today, which may cut into a little bit of that usage. But I still think he's got 40-point upside. I do think he may be priced out of this particular matchup on DK. But on FanDuel, I definitely think you want to get some exposure.
Yeah. I mean, it's just way too cheap. What about the second guy? We didn't know how many minutes he was going to play yesterday. We thought it was going to be a lot less than he did. Turns out they just decided to play him for 34 minutes. Had a decent little outing. Brogdon, second in of a back-to-back, obviously coming off an injury. 55% projected ownership over on DK, which he's just way too cheap over there, even if only plays 25 plus minutes. Oladipo might be coming back. Oladipo will probably cut into his usage a little bit. With what Warren's doing, is probably cutting his usage a little bit. Means he has him as a core play. Noto has him as a conviction play. What are your thoughts on Brogdon, especially over here on Draftkings, where he's just way too darn cheap?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's where you get your exposure at 5,400. Definitely underpriced there. I think that's really good value because, I mean, I think in your head, and I always like to think in terms of how much I think a guy will score that day. And obviously, I'm not trying to predict the future. I'm trying to get a reasonable outcome out of the price that they're at. And so with Brogdon being at 5,400, I think a reasonable expectation is around 35 fantasy points in this spot. And so at that particular rate, I mean, that's exceptional value for his price point. So I think he's a great play on DK. Obviously, I've been playing Miles Turner a lot, or the past two slates rather. He's burned me pretty bad. Will not be investing in Turner today only because I think the matchup warrants the fade. And like I said, it's kind of how I'm trying to approach the slate. So those are just little decisions, that I'm going to make here. But all in all, I like Brogdon on DK. Not as much on FanDuel.
Yeah. I'm just trying to figure out what I want to do. Like, the price tag is just too cheap right now. It's just tough to fade him, but he's going to come in at 56% ownership. Like, is there a chance that they only play him for like 20 minutes in this matchup? The problem is it's supposed to be close. Like, he's coming back from a hamstring injury, if I remember correctly, and like, I don't see many ways that he doesn't at least hit value at his price tag. Like, I hate playing 55, 56, 60% owned guys, and that's what we're probably going to have here with Brogdon. I don't know. Maybe it's a decent idea to see how the first two games play out, since this one's going to be in 5 hours. See how the first two games play out. See if you have to catch up, and if you do, maybe switch stuff around off of Brogdon. But we'll see what swaps we have off of him later on. What about over on the Orlando side? Vooch is going to be one of the highest owned centers on the slate, priced at 7.8K on both sides here. 23% ownership and 32% ownership. Is Vooch a guy that you're going to be using much of today?
Yeah, I like Vooch a lot. I've definitely got some exposure to him. I think it's great pricing. Once again, I think now is a good time to kind of talk about this. I've been talking about kind of my approach today in terms of my strategy, and I think today I'm going to have a lot of mid-range players. I'm going to be fading a lot of high-profile players, just because you get guys like Vooch, you get guys like Kawhi, Paul George, Rubio. Guys in that mid-range, Brogdon, who's a little bit cheaper, but kind of still in the mid-range. You'll get, Westbrook at 9,400, under 10K. They're just a plethora of guys. Porzingis at 9K. A plethora of guys that are under 10K that I think have immense upside today. And obviously, Nikola Vucevic is in that. So I love him today. I do think the ownership is a touch high, or a tad bit higher than I wanted it to be, but with how I'm approaching my build, I'm just going to have to accept that. But you definitely got to have some Nikola Vucevic shares for sure.
Yeah. I might not, but I know I should. But guys, if you haven't signed up for Sharp Side yet, go ahead and do that. Me and Will made some lock bets today. Don't know if we have the graphics to work because this show was so darn early in the morning here. But this game is actually where my lock bet's at. I think Indy's going to win this one. Like, they're currently a 1.5 point dog. My lock bet is Indy on the money line here at plus 103. I don't mind taking Indy plus 1.5. I don't mind, like, pretty much anything. Like, I think Indy wins this one, even on the second end of back-to-back. Like, and with Oladipo coming back, even if Brogdon's a little bit limited with all these guys playing, I think that they end up pulling this one off here. I'm a big fan of this bet. I have it on, I think, one or two different sites for sports betting too. But it's my Sharp Side lock. If you haven't signed up for it, you guys just lock contest gets free money for doing almost no work. You just pick one at the beginning of every day. Your streak gets up to 5, and you start making money for every correct pick you get after that. So, guys, get signed up for Sharpside, getting that competition. Will, what was your lock bet of the day? I think you talked about in the expert survey, too.
Yeah, I did. My lock bet of the day, I looked at this Celtics Heat game. I saw I had a total, around 220, 221, somewhere up in there. And so that's kind of my lock bet of the day. I'm taking the under on this game. I think it's going to be competitive. But in my head, this is more of a 104 to 109 game, not necessarily a 112 to 108 game, which is kind of how they have it posted. Boston -3.5. I think this is a game that can definitely go under. And so, that's the approach I took. I think that's a good one there.
All right. Well, anything else you want to talk about here, or should we move on to that game?
Oh, let's move on.
All right, on to the next one. We got Boston against Miami, 220.5 total here. Boston is a 3.5-point favorite. We got some interesting guys here. Butler, going to be heavily owned, but he's just priced a little bit too low here at 7.2K. We got Bam Adebayo, decent matchup here. Tatum, probably not going to draw a lot of ownership because it's not a great matchup. I'm trying to figure out what to do. This is the confusing game. We know that we've already talked about the plays in the other games. There's very clear plays in all those other games. This one may not be terribly high scoring here, and I'm just trying to figure out who I should target from this game and can't really find anyone that I really want to. Who are you thinking about in this game?
Well, the main person I'm targeting from this game is Kelly Olynyk. At 3,800, I think that's too cheap for the output we've been getting. Played 23 minutes against Denver, played 30 minutes against Toronto. So I think a reasonable expectation of minutes is around 25 minutes. And at 3,800, with what he's been giving us, I think it's too cheap. So I think Kelly Olynyk is a way that you can get off, some of the chalkier plays on FanDuel. Now you have to play him at center, which changes, your lineup construction. But that's probably a good thing on today's slate, where now you can kind of maybe fade some of the Brooklyn chalk, some of it, and play a guy like him at center. I mean, if he gets you 30 fantasy points, you're pretty much set as long as everyone else shows up. And on DK, especially at 3,800, I just think that's incredibly too low. So Kelly Olynyk is my favorite value play on the day on DK. And Jimmy Butler's obviously too cheap, so obviously he would be my second favorite play. Olynyk and Butler would be who I'm playing the most on DK. I just think those are two phenomenal plays.
Yeah. Butler just too cheap for what he offers here, and it looks like he's a conviction play here for Noto. People asking in the chat, what are your thoughts on Tyler Hero? Obviously there's some other semi-chalky guys that are pretty cheap. Any interest in playing Hero on the slate?
Look at 3.1K. I think it's fine. I don't think Tyler Hero has 30 to 40 point upside with everyone healthy. At 3.1K, obviously I think it's fine. I think he can go out and get you 20 fantasy points. Even if he gets you 25, you're fine. You can win a GPP with Tyler Hero getting 20 to 25 fantasy points. But I don't think his ceiling is higher than Kelly Olynyk with everyone healthy. And so if you want to get exposure to Tyler Hero, listen, please get exposure. But I just don't think – I think his ceiling is capped with everyone completely healthy.
Yeah, what about Kemba Walker here? Obviously hasn't been getting a ton of play in the bubble. But you look at his FanDuel price tag here, 4.8K. He can get some work done here. Any interest in Kemba?
Yeah, on FanDuel, I think, I'm fading Kemba on FanDuel until they tell me his minutes are back to, close to normal, which is why his price has been taking a massive dip, obviously. But at 4,800, I definitely think, you should get you some exposure on FanDuel. I'm not doing it, okay? I am not playing Kemba Walker. I think the Brooklyn guards are better value because they're going to play a lot more minutes than Kemba. And I kind of wrote this up on the expert survey too, but I think it's good to note that, when I looked it up, very small sample size, but I still thought it was pretty relevant. Most of these Brooklyn guys are averaging over a point per minute, over a fantasy point per minute with all those guys off the floor. So you got to expect Tyler Johnson, Chioza, these cheap guys. I think a reasonable expectation is 25 to 35 fantasy points which in my eyes makes them a better play than, most of the other values you're going to get at the position.
Yeah, that's a tough part. It's like it's marginal value. Like going from Tyler Johnson to Kemba, like, yes, you're getting less ownership, but you're getting a lot less safety, less minutes, and less upside in all likelihood, unless Kemba just decides to go out and play a decent amount of minutes here. So I hear you there. What about like Tatum, Brown, Hayward? You targeting any of these three?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're okay. I do have a little bit of Tatum on FanDuel. And guys, I know you're probably hearing me fade a lot of guys. It's just because of the way my build is broken out today. And so, you kind of have to separate my thought process and how I'm approaching it from how you would look at it. Obviously, I think Jaylen Brown and Hayward are going to be okay plays. I don't think they're necessary, though. I don't think they're guys you have to have in your build. For that reason, I don't have Jaylen Brown. I don't have any Gordon Hayward. I do have some Tatum because I feel like he's got the highest upside on this team. Daniel Tice on DK isn't bad at 4,900. So I think if you want to get a little bit of exposure to him, I think that's okay. But most guys on this team, most of this game I'm fading outside of, Jimmy Butler, Kelly Olynyk, and Jason Tatum. Outside of those three guys, it's pretty much a fade for me.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've said enough on this. We're motoring through, but we want to. This is the last game of the night. It's definitely an interesting one, so we want to save a little bit extra time for that, and then get to a few questions. Houston, Portland, 244 total. Gonna be close. Houston's only a 3.5-point favorite. Like, I'll let you start about what you think about Harden and Westbrook because I know you got some thoughts on them.
Yeah, so Harden is another full fade for me on FanDuel only. On FanDuel only. But guys, listen, I'm not telling you to fade James Harden. I'm just expressing to you what I'm doing based on how I see the build going today for myself. So when I talk about fading a lot of high-profile players, I pretty much X'd out everybody over 10 and 11K. I don't have anybody in my player pool over 10K today. Everybody's 10K and under. Just because I think there's massive upside with a guy like Westbrook. I think there's massive upside, with a guy like Dame Lillard under slightly under 10K on DK, and I think around 9,300 on FanDuel. I think there's massive upside in the Porzingis today. I think there's massive upside in playing a lot of these mid-range guys, Paul George, Kawhi. I just feel like that's where the upside is, and so I'm fading every high-profile player. I know they're going to get the ownership. But I'm going to live and die with it. And so today is one of those days where if all the mid-range hits, I'm going to be riding the wave to the money. If none of them hit or if they don't do as well as I hope and the studs still go off for 70, well, I'm probably going to lose everything. But that's tournament strategy. And so really like Westbrook today at 9,400. I just think it's still incredibly cheap for this particular matchup. So I'm all in pretty much on Westbrook today. I know I've kind of talked to you guys about a lot of players, but that's the approach I'm taking. These mid-range guys, I'm hammering the mid-range today like never before. So I love Harden, love this game environment, obviously. Daniel House, I think he can get some exposure. I don't think you ever need to play P.J. Tucker outside of a 2-game slate, so he's getting the X button, obviously. Covington, I think he's got the upside. I don't like the price on DK at 7,100, so don't really have much exposure to him. But, Russell and Harden, Daniel House, I think are your main targets from this team on both sides. However, I am fading Harden today and investing extremely heavily in Westbrook.
All right. I like that call. Like I might be doing the same thing. I'm just following you all over the place today, Will, just so you know. Me and you, we're in this together. What about over on the Portland side here? I mean, Nurk has been putting up massive outings in the bubble. Yes. 50, 54, priced at 8.5K, keeps getting an increase. Not going to draw a lot of ownership at that price tag. Dame went off in the last game versus Boston, 60 points. He's another guy that I think is a decent pivot off of Harden and Luka. Like, who are you looking at over on Portland? Which guys are you targeting? Guessing you're probably staying away from Melo and Hassan because they're just not worth it.
Oh, no. Oh, man, no. Now, Melo's not worth it on DK, so I'm not playing him on DK. On FanDuel, I have a fair amount. Melo's like 4,800.
Yeah, he's a little bit cheaper over there.
Yeah, so I've got plenty of Melo on FanDuel, not invested on DK. Nurkic is the guy I want to talk about from this team. Look, Dame's going to get his. CJ's been playing out of his mind. So has Yusuf Nurkic. If you look at what Nurkic has done since he's come back, I checked the numbers on it this morning. Obviously, it's going to be a small sample size because he's just starting to play. But if you look at these numbers, Nurkic is off the charts right now. 28% usage rate, 28.7 to be exact, averaging 1.71 fantasy points per minute since his return. That's been in 65 minutes. And obviously, we've seen the demise of Hassan Whiteside in this lineup. I just think, once again, another mid-range player that can get me 50 to 60. I love Nurkic today. I'm going to be well over the field, not a lock button, obviously, but I'm going to be incredibly over the field on Nurkic today. Just really think he's a great investment, along with Dame. I'm not really a CJ McCollum guy, but I can't overlook his performances recently in the bubble. And I think it's because this team wants to win. They want the HC like nobody else in this bubble. I think they can get it as long as they hit the threshold and get within, I think it's 3 games or 4 games, something like that. I think this is a pivotal game today. If they win this game, this is going to give them a chance to keep getting closer to that HC, really like Portland. CJ, Nurkic, Lillard, all guys I'm going to have exposure to.
Yeah, what about Zach Collins here? Like probably not over on FanDuel, but over on DK, sitting there at 4.3K. We saw how much ownership he got the first night. Now he's only projected for about 22. Not going to get you a ton of points, and there are some other decent value plays. Are you playing any Collins, or are you just avoiding him?
Full fade on Collins. Don't hate him. I don't hate him. But like I said, I've got a really small player pool today, and I know you guys can't see what I have. But just to give you an idea, let me go back because I talked about it earlier. I've got 30 players in my player pool today. So I'm really, really condensed in how I want to approach this slate. I'm really heavy on a lot of guys that I think are going to get there. And that's the approach I'm having. I've excluded 91 players out of my player pool, if anybody wants to know. I've got 30 players. So I'm really heavily invested in the guys that I like today. This is probably about the most condensed I've ever been on an NBA slate. I usually hover around 40 players, maybe. Usually I hover about around 40 to 43 players, and today I'm at 30. That tells you how much I like this mid-range and why I'm fading a lot of these higher price guys. I think they're going to be fine. I think, one of them's probably going to get 60, 70. I don't know who, but if the mid-range guys show up, it's going to be a really good day.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens. The guys, go ahead and drop those QQs in. We've gotten some throughout the show that I want to make sure that I get to. Let's start off with the first one. It is going to be, who are the cash game locks? I mean, you're a big cash game guy, if I remember correctly. Well, you do tournaments too. But who are your favorite cash game plays? Over on FanDuel, I feel like it's a few Brooklyn guys and then paying up for a few guys. But who's your cash game locks over there?
Well, honestly, I think on FanDuel, it's one of the cheaper Brooklyn guards. Take your pick, Chioza or Johnson. And then I think you lock in Kawhi Leonard in cash. He's 8,600. Like there's no reason to not play Kawhi in a cash game. I think he's the lock of the day over there. And Paul George is still too cheap at 7,700, I think. So those are some cash game guys. But I think Kawhi Leonard is the absolute lock of the day in cash games.
All right. I like that thought there. Tyler Hero or Justin Anderson? Single entry GPP.
Justin Anderson.
All right. How about going Westbrook and Dame in the same lineup? I'm assuming that you're okay with that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Instead of Hero, what's another value play that is not on the Heat? Brooklyn over on FanDuel.
On FanDuel?
Brooklyn. He didn't mention a site, but over on FanDuel, you got multiple.
I mean, Kelly Olynyk is the next value for the Heat.
Well, he's saying not on the Heat, but
not.
Yeah, pretty much Brooklyn players. Groups.
Yeah, let's Brooklyn players.
Sleepers of the day, we kind of already went over that.
Porzingis is a sleeper. This ownership is as low as they're projecting it to be.
If it's triple or quadruple what they're projecting it to be, it's still too low.
It's still too low. I mean, on FanDuel, we've got Porzingis projected at 3% right now. 3. On DK, we had him projected at around 1%. Is that right? 1%.
Yeah.
I think that's too low, but if that's right, you need to be jamming in Porzingis. That's all the tournament leverage you need.
I did not want to mass multi-answer today. I might have to. I haven't created a single lineup. I generally do them after the show, but as long as the contests aren't filled, I'm going to have a really fun 40 to 35 to 40 minutes right after the show. This is not going to be great, but yeah. Let's look real quick at your value plays. You got Wright and Olynyk. We didn't really talk about Wright too much over on Dallas during the show. You want to expand on that a little bit while we wait for some more questions?
Yeah, I think if Curry's going to be out, which they're pretty much saying he's doubtful, probably not going to play with a bruise or something like that. I think DeLon Wright, if he gets you, 25 to 30 minutes in this spot, I think that's a fine price. He's $3,800 on FanDuel, and I think he's $4,100 on DK. Is that right? Yeah, pretty sure it's $4,100. I think that's incredible value. So, in what should be a pretty high-scoring game, I think he gets some exposure to DeLon Wright because, he's also a guy that if they take Luke off the floor, they'll let him play point guard. And you're probably asking, well, Chief, what about Trey Burke sitting down here at $3,600? I think Trey Burke is okay, but I also know they could possibly roll out J.J. Barea. They could do some other wonky things, but DeLon Wright is a guy that I think has stable minutes in this particular matchup today, so that's why I like him a lot.
All right, best player on Orlando. I assume both of us are going to say Vooch.
Well, yes, but Aaron Gordon is too cheap on FanDuel. He's $5,600, $5,400, $5,600, somewhere up in there. Incredibly too cheap on FanDuel. I think you get your exposure to Aaron Gordon over there.
Yeah. Any interest in Brook Lopez for center for GPP on FanDuel? Yeah, I'm on the same page. Opinion on Hardaway Jr. with Curry out. You said you liked him over on FanDuel?
Yeah, Hardaway Jr. is too cheap on FanDuel. I think he's $5,200. So I really like him there. I probably won't play him on DK at $6,100, but $5,200, great price. Great price.
Looks like Alex Len is available to play today. Is today Tuesday? Today is Tuesday.
Yes.
All right. Temple or Wright for FanDuel cash?
I probably go Temple for cash. I think Temple's he's probably going to play. Well, let's hope he plays 30 minutes today. I think that's where I think that's about around where he'll be in terms of minutes, around 30 minutes.
All right. I'm looking through trying to find questions we didn't answer earlier. A lot of people talking about Brook Lopez, definitely not playing him. Is TJ Warren a must-have?
No, I don't think he's a must. But I think on FanDuel, you need to have exposure. But I do not think he's a must play.
All right. Thoughts on Tice?
I like Tice on DK, where he's $4,900. I know he's slightly over that on FanDuel. I think around 52. I don't hate it, but I don't think it's necessary.
All right. PG or Booker, same price?
PG.
I like that answer there. FanDuel GPP, THJ and Porzingis or Kawhi Aaron Gordon?
Kawhi Aaron Gordon to me. Well, no. Let's go THJ Porzingis. Sorry.
Yeah,
for tournaments. I'm sorry. For tournaments. Yeah, let's go Porzingis and THJ. The ownership is going to, too easy. Too easy.
Tatum or Porzingis, cash game FanDuel?
I'm still playing Porzingis.
I like that. I like that. Temple or Melo?
Which site?
Doesn't say.
I'm going to assume DK. And if it's DK, I'm going to say neither. If it's FanDuel, I'm probably going to side with Melo.
All right. Riding the Brogdon chalk?
On DK, absolutely.
All right. Any Reggie Jackson on FanDuel today?
I don't hate that call at 4,100. Lou Will is out of quarantine now. That does not mean he's going to play today. He could, but I think at 4,100, I think he's leveraged on some of these other cheaper Nets guards. I still don't think it's necessary, but I totally get it.
All right, guys. Well, we have just run out of time here. Will, it's been fun. Thanks for joining me. Everyone out there, good luck on your contest tonight. We're out of here. See you, kids.